I think if you lock yourself into a belief system, you're already behind. That's my belief anyway. And then people get irritated with the fence sitting and all that. It's like, well, what else are you going to do? As soon as you put yourself in a camp, and say, this is my belief, you're going to have to start supporting it. And with UFOs and the paranormal and a lot of things like that we talk about on the show, you can't really. There's no ironclad open and shut case for any of these things. That they exist, I think there is a pretty solid case that there's something weird going on, and that there is something that's not human that interacts with us occasionally. I think the case is fairly solid for that. But past that, I don't know.
You don't want to be in a box.
Well, yeah, because it'll close off my options. It closes off my options for learning and for listening and for meeting people. It might have a different, point of view. I've got firm beliefs in other areas, like moral things and all that, but not, UFOs, no. I mean, why tie yourself down?
I think one of the things is that believing in ETH was simple. We know there are other planets. We know there are other star systems. So to posit some kind of advanced civilization, it just seems to make sense because they can't possibly come from here, right? And then nowadays, of course, with our various probes, Hubble telescope, etc., we see evidence that there are possible Earth-like planets on other star systems. We say, hey, okay, so if their civilization has advanced to the right point, they're coming here because we are important enough for space travelers to want to find out what we're like.
Maybe. I mean, I think we're probably just as important as any other group of sentient beings. And if there are intelligences coming here, I don't think they're coming here in nuts and bolts craft traveling across space like we take a train or an airplane somewhere. I think they've gone beyond that, and that those things are just ways that we, the fact that there's physical traces and all that, maybe they've learned to, handle matter in a different way than we do, or have a different concept of it. I don't know. But I don't think it's physical people coming in here and craft from other planets, because it's just, according to our current ideas about things, it would just take too damn long. So it must be in the realm of something that we haven't thought of yet, or are just beginning to think of. And we can go into that too, but that's a whole other subject.
So, very briefly, you don't think UFO research has gone anywhere, because the prevailing belief is the same one that was here 60 years ago.
No, I don't. I think it's gone forward in certain areas, but the belief system hasn't changed. No, and there's no real evidence for it except for our beliefs and our hopes and our expectations, I think. It might be a logical conclusion, but it's a logical conclusion based on our civilization and our way of thinking and our view of the universe and our view of physics at present. And that's going to change. There's no doubt that it's going to change, because it's changed in the past.
Very much a moving target. Now, Just a few weeks ago, your friend and sometimes co-host, Walter Bosley, appeared on the Paracast. And I think we maybe scratched the surface just barely in asking him questions about the things he knows, the things he's experienced. So we've invited him back on. You'll hear him next on
the Paracast.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Hey neighbors, have you been thinking about starting a website? Well, I'm going to tell you about a great offer from HostGator. HostGator is a world-famous leader in web hosting, and they make it easy for you to get your own .com domain name. You create your very own website with their free site builder tools and great selection of templates. Use the coupon code Paracast. Once again, use the coupon code Paracast and sign up at this special address, theparacast.com/gator. That's Gator, theparacast.com/gator.
We want to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our forums where you can talk to fellow listeners. Just go to theparacast.com and click on the forum links. That's the forum links at theparacast.com.
You're in the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
We are joined by Walter Bosley, former government agent, and he is not here, by the way, to find out what's happening with the Paracast with me and Greg. Where are you?
No. That's not why I'm here.
Okay. You're here to answer questions.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and discuss things, interesting things.
Sure. Well, you made a brief, something more than a cameo appearance in our forums after your last appearance. Yeah. In depth. People ask questions, and sometimes the people in the forums, as you and I know, those of us who have been online for many, many years, realize that sometimes people who visit you in the forums kind of feel they have the right to know everything. So what is your story about that?
Well, regarding the forums, I will start and say that, I come out here and I tell you who I am. And those who go in there and they don't, provide a real name, they just kind of make all their comments behind a screen name. I kind of have to remind myself to really just dismiss those people and their comments because, there's really nothing else you can do. If they won't tell you who they are, then their comments, mean little.
So basically, they won't tell you who they are, but they want to know everything about you. They want to see that you really work for the FBI. They want to have all the papers from your government service. They want to see your Social Security card and your birth certificate. Well, we want that from Obama, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just referring to those who don't identify themselves. I mean, there's guys out there that, they're in the various forums and their name is right there. They tell you who they are. And that, to me, that's step one if you're going to be publicly critical or discerning or questioning or whatever you want to call it, to whatever degree it is. It's like, my name? I want to know yours. To me, that's the fair thing. So, anyone whose identity I don't really know, or at least whose name I don't know, I have to remind myself to dismiss any arguments they make, and go from there.
You know what? I'm a little bit different, Walter, and I don't totally agree. The thing is that if you've put yourself in a public forum, you have to be public. I wrestled with this, too, very early on with UFO Mystic. And now with the Paracast forum and a few others, it's kind of, if you're going to be public and you're going to present your ideas, the onus is on you to kind of have your name out there. If somebody's going to ask you questions, in a civilized way, in a nice, logical way, I don't really care whether they're anonymous or not. But once they start getting nasty, either they should be not anonymous or they should shut up.
Well, there you go. We actually agree because the way you qualified it, I will add one thing. Yeah, I put myself out there. You put yourself out there. Various people do to discuss things. But on the other hand, if somebody's going to go into a forum, which is also just as public, then I think, again, if they're going to get to a certain level of critical, then they should identify themselves because, hey, that's just as public.
I'll put up with a lot from people as long as they're being civilized and logical. I don't really care who they are. But if they start turning into dicks, I either shut it down or say, then I pull the, it's very easy for you to be the way you are because you're anonymous. So this is the end of the conversation. That's what I usually do.
Yeah, and as I've said, I am not one of these guys who fell in love with logic when I was in, high school, and it's just the thing that turns me on. And I mean, we know these people. You can't have a human conversation with these kind of people. The logic lovers, you just can't, because you could be talking about pizza and they're analyzing how you said what you said and what that meant according to the academic rules of logic. And it just, wow, what a interesting, boring way to go through life.
Well, there's another thing too. I mean, it's an attitude too. On a show like this one is, I don't know, my attitude on my show is I'm going to let the person say what they want to. If I don't agree with them, that's fine. If I can prod them a little bit to make sure that they've got their story straight, and that even the audience realizes that I'm not buying it, I suppose. Yeah. However, I'll let people say what they want to say. If there's going to be some kind of pitch or some kind of, you got to give me money for this idea, or I'm coming from a position of authority, so buy my book or whatever, then I start getting a little suspicious.
Sure. Yeah. And rightly so, because, they're trying to push something on people. They're trying to sell something specific to what they're talking about. So you should be, a little bit more. But, and again, folks, we're talking about the hypercritical. Okay. We're talking about those who, no matter what you say, it's never going to be enough. My question is, the question that comes to my mind is why are you here? Are you really interested in these subjects? And is there anything about the topic of the paranormal in general, and I throw in UFOs there, that you do buy into, that you do think is possible as such? Because it's kind of like if you hate soccer, but you keep going to soccer games. After a while, you gotta ask yourself, okay, what am I doing here? I hate this sport. I hate this game. Why do I keep coming? That's something that comes to my mind when I encounter the hypercritical, the unreasonable.
Okay, now there's another thing too here.
Yeah.
Say you're one guy, one gal, or a few people, and you see something strange. And I have an editorial about this in the current issue of the Paracast newsletter. So if you go to theparacast.com, there's a place where you can subscribe to the newsletter, and you get my commentaries. So I don't always do commentaries on the show. I write up a commentary every single week. And one of the things I pointed out is the fact that, when you have a paranormal experience of whatever kind, it's very difficult to prove it unless you have the camera handy and take a picture, and people will look at it and say the picture's a fake.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so because you could Photoshop anything nowadays and create fake pictures. And a lot of times, if you see something, you're so nervous when you see it that you don't have the time to focus the camera and press the zoom button and get a good picture. It's lucky you get something in the camera. Okay, so that's one thing. And then, if it doesn't leave any other evidence, like a UFO may land and leave trace evidence, but usually you see something in the sky. And if you see an apparition, well, folks, it's not something that you could just repeat. It's there. It may never come back. So how do you prove it? What's the next stage? Do you try the lie detector test? Is that going to help? Maybe we'll have a lie detector test. So therefore, we'll have to see whether we could try with a lie detector test. And, there's a problem with lie detector tests. They're not always reliable. Sometimes people can beat the test.
Without saying things I really shouldn't in a public forum, past experience with, I'll just say this, folks. There is no such thing and never has been such thing as a true lie detector. That's impossible. And I'll leave it at that, because you bring up a very good point. The polygraph, there's a reason why polygraph results are not submitted in a court of law. They've been around for decades, and that's because there are issues with its, but it serves a true and valid purpose in investigative issues, criminal investigative issues, and I'm all for the use of them. But its effectiveness is not where people think it is.
Okay, so since you raised the question, where is the effectiveness? That's the psychological factor where somebody says, gee, I better tell the truth because it's a lie detector?
I'm not saying, I'm not like the TV shows that want to show all the secrets that, law enforcement uses, because some things, they work best if the general public doesn't know them. And so, I ain't talking.
Because you're not supposed to, or because you don't feel like it?
It wouldn't be ethical of me.
Okay. I just wanted to reason. I think it might have something to do, actually, with the techniques that are used when you have a lie detector there, the kind of questions that are asked, and the kind of people that are there, and the kind of people that are in the situation in which it is applied.
Well, we're not asking you the secrets of the trade. We're just more or less talking about why they'd be effective.
That's one of the secrets of the trade. It's why it's effective.
We are in a big circle here.
Anybody listening could probably look up some of these answers online and get some of the answers.
Probably so. And as I've said on your show and others, a guy in my position, there's things I cannot say that you can find in open sources. But if I say it, I feel the flame on my backside. So.
Like Daniel Sheehan, the lawyer, once said, that things that you can find in open sources are sometimes more frightening and surprising than most people would expect.
Oh, I definitely can agree with that.
You just have to look. Walter knows this, and Gene knows this, and probably most of the listeners and some of the guests know this, is that once you start digging and looking around and going to libraries, not just on the internet, but going to libraries and talking to people, you start finding that you're not so amazed by what people found out in their last book and reported to you or whatever.
Right. And, since we're on the issue of investigative techniques and the paranormal, here's what I have discovered, and I am discovering, is that these investigative techniques that we want to apply to these phenomena, I'm learning are just they're not measuring up, because we're dealing with something that I think is sentient. It's aware. This is an aware being, entity, and it has the advantage of being able to manifest extraordinary ways. And
now, are you thinking basically here of the overall phenomenon being an entity, or each individual experience in terms of seeing creatures or whatever?
It depends on the experience. One experience to the other is different. There's a UFO experience. There's seeing a ghost. There's seeing, a Bigfoot. There's, some of the encounters I've had. In my particular case, my experiences, I think that, you're dealing with, something sentient. So what it knows how to do is evade investigative measurement. I mean, how perfect to take a guy like me who's been a federal criminal investigator in counterintelligence and manifest itself in a way that I can neither capture evidence that would really convince people, or even, any evidence, be able to prove it, even in a discussion.
I think it's more like measuring wind without a wind meter. You just don't have you either don't have the tool, or the tool has not been invented yet that will measure these things, or be there when something is going to happen, or whatever. I mean, it's just designed not to be examined with the tools that we have. A lot of these paranormal things, ghost hunting, maybe a little bit more. You've got some chance there, but once again, you can't predict it, you can't reproduce it. It's basically you have to be there when it happens.
What I'm arguing is that the minute you designed the meter that can measure it, guess what? It's going to manifest itself in the way that none of the meters will measure it. And that's
I would tend to think that's probably what would happen, yeah.
I used to not think things like this. I used to think, no, come on, there's got to be with technology and science, by golly, it can be measured. And the more experiences I've had, the more I've changed that position.
And maybe it's like this quantum mechanics kind of thing, that if you measure it or see it, that in and of itself changes it.
Yeah, very much so. It might exactly. For instance, I see something on the side of a mountain. I take a photograph of it, okay, and then when you're looking at the photograph, it just doesn't look the same. Or you show it to someone else, and they're saying, "I don't see it. I don't see it." So maybe you outline it. You show them a photograph untouched, then you show them, the one with the outline, and then the filter of their prejudice comes in, and very often you hear things like, "Well, I don't see that," and so then where are you left? What do you do? There's never a shortage of people that will say, "Well, you imagined it," or, "Well, this is like this." Psychological, what's the word for it? I don't want to say disorder. I don't want to say neurosis or anything. It's
phenomenon.
Yeah, a psychological phenomenon. And when you look closely at the definition of those psychological phenomena that supposedly explain these experiences, really, when you really get down to it, what you're seeing is someone in the profession of psychiatry has taken something and just given it labels, essentially. Not in all cases do you find things where they were able to duplicate this in the laboratory. They just they're really making an assumption that okay, well, this experience must be this, and we're going to label it as such. Well, now that we've got a nice, neat, and tidy label, everybody can dismiss this experience because psychology has given it a label. And there's a lot of people. We live in the times, and we live in a society, a civilization right now where the specialist is king. I mean, you got somebody with a pedigree after their name, and, you know, they can use their logic to prove the Earth is square because they're PhD, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And we got a lot of people who they accept that. They say, well, okay, this is the guy. He's the expert. I think that there's error in going too far in that direction.
Picture this. You're on the phone with a client or colleague trying to explain something visual. A PowerPoint, a keynote presentation, a website. But it's frustrating because they can't see what you're talking about. The solution? Good news. They can if you invite them to an online meeting using GoToMeeting. Then they can see your computer desktop on their computer screen, so you can show them what you're talking about. I use GoToMeeting all the time to collaborate with colleagues and with clients. You can try GoToMeeting free for 30 days, but you must visit GoToMeeting/podcasts. That's GoToMeeting.com/podcasts for a free 30-day trial.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast. Let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
We have Walter Bosley joining us. Our co-host is Greg Bishop, and we're talking, I guess, to start about investigative techniques, about belief systems, what you should believe, what maybe you shouldn't, and about the value, I guess, also of eyewitness testimony, because we've talked about the fact that Walter has had experiences, and then sometimes people will be skeptical, and we're not asking you to believe everything that a person claims they experience, but you get back to the core statement and the core reality, which is you have to depend on someone's word for many of these things, because otherwise there's nothing to investigate. Because 98% of all the experiences that we report, paranormal experiences, it's all eyewitness testimony.
You know what this reminds me of? Remember when Paul was on with us the other day, Walter, on my show? And he said when he was working, and he might have said this in the Paracast, they were working in England, and him and the co-host and maybe another person heard horses' hooves on a cobblestone street. There's no cobblestone street where they were doing their filming. But they did not record it. The recorder was going at the same time, and it did not show up on any of their recordings. Yet, two independent people heard what they heard was cobblestone, horses' hooves on cobblestone.
It was Holly. Yeah, I believe it was Holly who was one.
Yeah, well, Paul heard it too, but then he didn't admit it till later. But what this brings up is, okay, you've got two people that have independently verified something without talking to each other first, but your instrument, your recorder, did not pick it up. So where is it? Did it happen? You know, is that the right question? You know,
and I'm telling you, there are a lot of people out there that they're just going to say it didn't happen. This is ridiculous. If you couldn't record it, then you were imagining it. It didn't happen, and that's it. The end of story for them. You know, and personally, as someone who is an experiencer of things, to use a word that I've heard, I really have. I'm not interested in trying to convince the naysayer that it's a waste of time. It's a waste of my energy. They're just predisposed to think about something differently than me. I'm not interested. I'm just really not. It's a waste of energy and time, I have found, to try to convince the naysayer.
Well, the best you can do, I think, is just tell people what happened, the evidence that leads you to believe one thing or another, if there is any evidence, and then you're going to have to either take it or leave it based on the individual. If that individual does not have a reputation for making up stories, you kind of have to at least take them seriously. Otherwise, where do you go with it? Otherwise, you say everybody's a liar.
What this reminded me of was the show the other day with Paul Kimball on Radio Mysterioso. Walter was there. We were all there in person, and Paul was talking about ghost cases. When you talk about instruments and measurements and all that, he and his co-host, Holly Stevens, both independently heard horse hooves on cobblestone at this old church where there are no cobblestones anymore, or it's an old house or something like that. It's one of the reported phenomena at that location. They'd heard it separately, didn't talk about it, and then Holly was talking to one of the crew people or the producer and how it freaked her out, and then Paul said, I heard that too. And I don't think anybody else had heard it. And the recorder was going, apparently, at the time that these horse hooves were running around on the cobblestones outside. So what does that tell you? What does that mean? Your instrument didn't pick it up, so it was a hallucination? I think we got to change our language a little bit in some cases.
Well, of course, there's a lot of things going on around us that we do not see, we do not hear. The reverse, because our senses are very limited.
Yeah, but an instrument will pick it up.
Well,
if it's physical. If
the instrument is physically sensitive to that, whatever it is.
Yes, exactly. But what are we dealing with when two people clearly hear a noise for a certain period of time? It's not it's not something they thought they heard, not something they were mistaken about, but they swear they heard it, and then two of them independently, without talking to each other first, say they heard it. But nobody else did, really, and it wasn't picked up on a recording. So where does that leave you? Does that mean that the experience is a hallucination or wrong or false? I don't think so. And I think probably Walter would agree with that.
Oh, when you have two people who independently experience the same audio phenomenon, one of whom is Paul. He questions things, and he's not somebody that's a pushover for stuff, and he heard it too. That right there is some pretty hefty evidence, so to speak, if we're going to call it that. So, exactly, what do you do with experiences like that? Who's to say? Who can just write that off and dismiss it?
Well, obviously, trying to figure out what's going on and to unearth what's going on is going to be one super royal pain. I think that's one of the things we understand, but I think that's kind of preamble, showing the difficulty of measuring the things that we see or hear, of the fact that you may see something or hear something that nobody else sees, or you just one person. You're one person, you sit there, you see a ghost, you see the grays, you're taken aboard a spaceship. It's your memory of what happens. Mm-hmm. How do you prove it? What do you do? Let's move more. I think it would be a good idea now to go back, Walter, into some of your experiences and your remembrances of your father, for example, because of some of the things he told you. And let's explore them with the understanding that, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how we can prove this to you. We're going to have to accept that Walter does have government experience. Greg has certainly seen the papers and independently confirmed where he can that you are Walter Bosley, who you say you are. Now let's look at the experiences. Going back to your dad and Roswell. Mm-hmm. And as I recall here, you were given this knowledge over a period of years, not something he told you in one sitting. Hey, son, let me tell you about this, right?
Right, exactly. It started in the late 70s, talking about this crash at Roswell, New Mexico, and continued on up into recent years. And of course, after I had been an agent for a while, and I became a little more well versed in interview techniques. I knew how to talk to him about it, to both measure his integrity to the degree that the investigative tools I have work, and they are effective to a degree. And also to, kind of coax him to tell me more. And his story never, his story about the bodies that were found never changed. His frustration that on the insistence that it was the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that never changed. It stayed consistent. Yes, I got a little bit more out of him in recent years, but always consistent with the whole story, and consistent with other things that I had learned, about the same situation through other means. And he said that these were not extraterrestrials. They were people from here, this planet. And, as I've written about it, if you want to go to the April 2005 issue of Fate magazine, the article is in there under my pseudonym because at the time, I had employment that was somewhat professionally sensitive. So I did not put that article in there under my name Walter Bosley. It's under a fiction pseudonym, E.A. Guest. Since then, I have said, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that was my dad. And according to him, these people went underground a long time ago. There had been a cataclysmic event on the surface of the planet, and a bunch of people went underground, and several of them stayed there. A big number of them stayed there and, developed their own civilization, as it were, parallel yet hidden to our own. And according to him, they really didn't want much to do with us at all. The only reason he had interaction with them was because in the late 50s, a Roswell situation happened again. And he was in the...
Let me just stop right there. A Roswell situation happened again. Where?
In eastern Arizona.
Okay. Where in eastern Arizona?
Specifically in the vicinity of Winslow.
It sounds like the movie Starman.
Well, Starman, the movie Starman sounds like this event that I heard about before Starman.
Okay, tell us about the event then.
Okay. A craft from underneath, according to my dad, out on the surface, crashes, and the pilot is missing, pilot, crew, whatever, are missing, and these people come to, through whatever liaison they have, however they did it, they came to, our people, our military, presumably the Air Force, because this is the late 50s, and said, hey, we need some help finding our guy. So, again, according to my father, a mission was put together, led by an interesting gentleman known as Wilson, who headed up the search and rescue, so to speak, plus the interaction with the people under the ground, according to my dad. And that's why he had to be briefed in on Roswell, because of his clearance and what he did. He was one of many who was part of this effort, and had to be briefed in on Roswell because it was pretty much a very similar, if not same, situation. And from there, he went to Arizona and worked in this effort to find this guy and this missing individual from the crashed craft and be involved with the interaction. And he saw the underground and he encountered these people underneath there, according to him. And I have reason to think that he sincerely believed he was telling me the truth. He used to break down emotionally when he got to the point of the story where the guy he was working with was killed by one of these people. So, that's just one indicator.
Well, certainly he wouldn't just make it up just for the sake of his son. Did he know at the time that you were interested in the subject?
Well, what happened was it started because, I grew up, my sisters and I, we grew up with our dad's interest in this UFO topic. I mean, you remember the old Look magazine and Life magazine articles during the 60s, that, the late 50s, early 60s, going through the 60s, that a lot of people have now as collector's items. I mean, we still have these things. And these were always around the house. This was the late 60s, and, we'd look at them, and, my dad was enthused about this when the subject came up. And in the late 70s, I remember there had been a TV show on, and it was right before Close Encounters came out. And this is when he first started talking about this. And, some people say, well, Starman, Close Encounters. I find it interesting that, he insisted that these were not extraterrestrials. If he were just, jumping on something to impress the kiddies, why not say, well, yep, absolutely, these ETs are real. No, he was, it used to amuse him and frustrate him both. Two things: that the insistence that it was ETs, the assumption, the presumption, which many of us now like to call the ET religion, and the fact that it was being kept secret because, it would freak people out. And he always said, this is something, they want nothing to do with us. This is something that, think about your daily life. If there's a civilization inside, underneath the surface of the planet, if there is in subterranea, How does that change most people's daily existence? It really does not.
Well, maybe the perception that there's another intelligent race here can have catastrophic impact on certain people who like to think they're in control of things.
Well, yeah, but then you're getting into people who like to think they're in control of things, or have or is it more the people who have a driving need to feel in control of things? Yeah, see, exactly. You're always going to have people that are going to be bothered by something. You could say that there are people there that are plenty bothered by some of us having the experiences we talk about. So there's an example, possibly of what you're talking about. That's like, hey, wait a minute. If I'm not having it, it's not real. Or how come you're having it and not me? Or, any number of things. But his thing was that they were not extraterrestrials. He felt
okay, but let's look at this in more detail. Okay, describe the creature. Does that creature pass for human? He walks among us. You see him at the local Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah,
you just pass him by? Oh, okay.
Yeah, his description was they were just like us, but with less body hair. Little to no body hair was the description, he gave me.
Okay, but therefore bald-headed?
Yeah.
Okay. And as far as limbs, fingers, anything else, looks normal? Eyes, lips, mouth?
Look normal. He just said little to no body hair.
Okay, looks like us. All right. Now, did he learn anything more about our interaction with these beings?
Well, when he was part of the project, he was underground. He was part of they were all part of the overall search effort. But then they were interacting because they were underground and these people were there. And he didn't give me the details of what specifically they were doing that day that the man got killed, just that they were underneath the ground. And it had to do with, what's interesting is there was some technology exchange going on, and it was from us to them. There was some small little aircraft that we had designed, and we were training them in using it. It could be used underground, according to him. Okay.
Okay. Wait a minute here. So it's not the aliens or the crypto-terrestrials in this case having greater technology than us. It's us giving them technology?
No, Gene. They did have technology with their flying machines, but all I can tell you is what my dad told me, okay?
Sure. Well, that's what I want to understand.
And what he told me was there was a flying machine that we were also going to share with them. Now, I can't explain the politics or the wheres or whys of if they have these, their flying machines, why they would want or need one of ours. I can actually, as an Air Force guy, I can tell you exactly why. We got our own airplanes, but golly, we don't miss a chance to get someone else's if we can. I mean, come on, that's done in the real world all the time. So to me, that's not a big aha, against the story in any way. It's just part of the story. And he was part of the training program that went on with these things. Our guys were using these things too to fly around down there, but he happened to tell me also that we were also giving some of them to them. So, maybe they just wanted to try out our stuff, and I don't know. What's the implication you could get out of that? That maybe we got one of theirs and tried out one of theirs too. I mean, there's stories about that. This is the story he told. And when they encountered these people, he and two guys he was with, they encountered a couple of these people. He described this item he described it as a tube that all they did was raise it and point it at the guy my dad was with. And the next thing he knew, that guy he was with, it was like he was a machine that just shut off. Somebody just turned the switch off, and he, dead before he hit the ground. And this is the part of the story that would, get him kind of, emotional, upset, was describing this guy just shutting off. And he said that their sense of sight wasn't as good as, the hearing and other senses, which when you think about it, if they're in a subterranean world and such, we know there's animals like bats and stuff that...
Yes, but wouldn't they be more sensitive because it's darker?
You know what? I don't know, Gene. I mean, but
Sure.
I didn't say that they couldn't see. I said that their other senses, that's what he told me, is that their other senses were stronger and more developed than their sight.
Fate magazine provides true reports of the strange and unknown. Keep up with the latest on angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, life after death, and much, much more. To receive your free issue of Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730 or www.fatemag.com. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
You've entered another dimension. You've entered the Paracast.
We have Walter Bosley, former government agent, talking about the remembrances of his dad, who met this subterranean race. Greg Bishop's our co-host, and we're exploring these details, trying to get more information out of it. Now, you talked to your dad pretty much very late in his life when you got all this information, right?
Not all of it, the portion of it, yeah, before he died.
Right.
Most of it before he died, years before.
Okay. And the question I guess we always look for is corroboration. So he tells you the story, which is different, as you might imagine, from other people who claim to have knowledge about Roswell and other incidents. Is there anything out there that we can find that someone had a similar experience anywhere?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, if anyone else has, I haven't really heard anyone talk about an experience quite like what my dad, said he had. Now, you got to remember, me personally, and I've said this before, I lean towards Joseph Farrell's theory. And I take a lot of crap from that by the ET, religion true believers and the people that just anything but the Nazis, there's people like that, but I'm sorry. I think Joseph Farrell makes one hell of a good argument and presents it well, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
For those who haven't heard that argument, and we do plan to have Joseph Farrell on the Paracast sometime in the near future, what fundamentally, basically, is his theory here?
Joseph proposes that the Roswell incident had to do with World War II era, post-World War II era Nazi technology that either was, the surviving Nazi organization, whatever that was, itself flying this thing over Roswell, or possibly, us with our German engineers that we had captured from Germany, developing and attempting to use some of this technology ourselves. But that it was indeed very much technology that started right here on Earth with our own human engineers and scientists. And he presents, he points to it. He presents a very good argument. Most of the people, not all, but most of the people I know that just vehemently oppose it, it comes down to, well, there's no way because everybody knows they weren't developing, technology like that in World War II. Okay, when you get into the everybody knows argument, you've lost me. But and a lot of people who oppose Joseph's theory have never read Joseph's books. So I would just say, check them out.
I'm reading it right now, Roswell and the Reich, and I'm still on the fence. I'm still waiting for him to make the case that really makes me go, oh my God, he's got a great case here. But I'm going to finish the book.
How far are you in the book?
Probably about a third of the way.
Oh yeah, no. There's more to come. I'll be surprised.
Well, obviously, there's more and more arguments.
There's really good, solid stuff there. But anyway, my point is, I lean towards that. Even with the story my dad told me, I lean towards Joseph's theory. So I just want everybody clear on where I stand on this. But my dad's story and his belief in it was so compelling to me that, I felt it's worth sharing. It's worth getting out there in the mix, because the ET hypothesis just ain't answering the questions and hasn't been for a while. So we have to look, in other ways, at other directions.
What do you do with that information then? I mean, what you've done with it, just kind of repeat it to people and take it under advisement?
Share it and well, okay, let me throw something out to you as far as any kind of verifier. Now, Greg, you remember this because you were present, okay? There was a gentleman that I became acquainted with through Greg, the legendary and infamous Bill Moore. I know there's booers and hissers out there right now as I mentioned that name. And we were talking one day at Dupar's, I believe, there at the farmer's market. And I had told Bill, this is when I first met him, Greg had told him a bit about me and my dad's story. So he agreed, yeah, let's, get together for lunch. So I told him a bit of I told him my dad's story, and he suggested that I ask my dad what the name of a particular individual was. Okay? Now, the point is that he asked me to ask what the name was. I'm not going to go into greater detail because I don't think I'm at liberty to do so without Bill here. Okay? So I'm not going to say the name. Sorry, folks, but that's not the point. The point is, he said, ask your dad if this individual, was on that plane. See, what happened was my dad and the guys he was working with back in Alabama, they got on a plane at Gunner Air Force Base, and they were flying to Texas. They were supposed to be going, I think, to I don't know if it was Kelly or whatever, but one of the bases in Texas where the intel stuff is. And somewhere, over Louisiana, the plane takes a northward banking turn, and an intel officer comes out and tells them, guys, we're not going to Texas, we're going to Ohio. And so anyway, next time I got together with my dad, I know how to ask things. I'm a former federal criminal investigator, so I know how to slip stuff in and do it in a way that it doesn't feed anything. And so, the next time I was with my dad, a few days later, I did the old, hey, because he had never told me the person's name, but I kind of fit it in there. It's like, hey, remember when, when you were on the plane and you were being told, in Ohio, what was that guy's name? You mentioned it, and he just rattled the name right off, the name and the rank, the same one. The
intelligence officer on the plane, you mean?
Yes, and it was the same name that Bill, and I'd never heard the name before ever in the years my dad told the story and ever in my life. And I'll be damned if, 2 days later, I did it in a way that I acted like he had told me before, but he hadn't. And he just rattled it off. And it was the same name that Bill had told me to ask him about. And, where I'm coming from, my perspective, that to me is something. I don't know how Bill knew that name. I don't know where it came from for him, but what I thought was interesting is my dad, who didn't know Bill Moore at all, never met him, didn't know who he was, out pops that name. So that was one of the few pieces of this that I could ever say, well, for those who, by golly, gotta have some type of verifier, I think at the moment off the top of my head, that's the closest I can come to it. For that.
Verifier, meaning that your father sort of would have a clue as to what he was talking about. Did you describe what this plane flight was and when it was?
To whom?
On the show just now.
Oh, I thought I just did. It was, my dad they were going to Texas on what they thought was, not a deployment, but TDY, a TDY to another base. And yes, I did describe it, where then instead of going to Texas, they went to Ohio.
Yes, but when was this flight? What date?
This was in the late 50s. I'd have to look at his DD-214 I think 1957.
Okay, what is that DD-215, is it?
DD-214
or DD-214 is what?
Is a standard discharge paper that gives you the basics that says, yeah, you were in the service from these dates to that dates, and it would tell me the date he got out. It was about a year before he got out. It was in the year before he got out, and I believe he got out in 58, and this happened in 57. And so it was 1957, and 10 years after Roswell, and he went to Ohio, and they were briefed in on what their mission was really about. They were briefed in on Roswell, and then off to Arizona they went, according to him.
Okay, but obviously this experience flies in the face of what Joseph Farrell says, because he's talking about Nazis and Nazi-type invention involvement.
It would seem so.
Okay.
It would seem so.
Okay, just trying to kind of clarify that. Now, your
Walter's
father...
fine with that.
Okay, that's cool. I'm cool with that. Okay, maybe there are a couple of different explanations here. But let's look at your father's experiences in more detail. Okay, so he was discharged the following year.
Yes.
Okay, now,
honorably discharged, I will add.
Right, but he had a later experience. He went back in the service, or what?
No, all the stuff I'm telling you happened in his last year of service.
Okay. Just clarifying the date structure. Okay, now, then, nobody came to him, said, listen, man, you can't tell your family. You don't want anyone else to know about this. It's top secret, whatever.
Oh, I'm sure he got the security briefing and signed this, that, or the other, but he didn't start even hinting at it until... about 20 years after he got out of the service. And then by the time I got the full details, hell, he'd been out of the service, going on 50 years, 40 years or over 40 years. So, after a while, after so many years, something that extraordinary, I imagine. And you got to remember, he's telling me, his son, who, by the way, since 1988 has had a top secret clearance. Beyond top secret. So, maybe he felt comfortable, telling me, and there you go. That's all I can say about that.
I understand. And since you had the Fate article published, your employers didn't come to you and say, Walter, why'd you do that?
Nope.
Okay.
Not at all. And, too, he wasn't telling me everything. I mean, always felt that there was, he was just telling me, what he felt comfortable telling. Of course there was, more to it, I would say. But it is what it is, it's what he told me. I measured his, demeanor and other, what we call indicators, as he would tell me each time. And, he certainly believed what he was telling me actually happened.
We don't think it was some kind of psyops then?
Oh, is that possible? Sure.
I don't know.
Why not? I mean, why not? If they want to cover up the real story, they could have poured this stuff into his head, using hypnosis maybe or whatever. And this was the cover story, and so that when, he would get itchy and start wanting to talk about it, he would give the cover story instead of the truth. Who knows? That's possible. I don't know. I have no evidence. And have never really said I've had any evidence, so.
No, I appreciate that. What about the other members of your family? What do they think of all this?
It's interesting. My mom and my sisters, they're, I have one sister that's kind of finds it interesting, but she's a little bit skittish on the weird and the strange and extraordinary phenomena. She's a little more traditional in her views on that. And then the other two, my mom and my oldest sister, they just don't say much about it. They don't really discuss it too deeply. They don't get into it. It's not something that grabs them. They don't know what to think about it, I think. So.
What do they think about you? And
well, they all have, from what I hear, the highest opinion of me. The things I've done and accomplished. They don't brush it off. They don't say, "Oh, that Walter." I mean, yeah, they say, "Oh, that Walter," for other reasons, because come on, I'm the youngest kid and the only boy in the family, so I was the little prince. So I've got a confidence level that I think it fools people sometimes. How high people assume sometimes my confidence level isn't as high as it actually is. But as far as this stuff goes, they don't act like or talk behind my back like, oh, Walter's crazy. I think they just don't know what to say because they know that I'm not crazy. Here's the thing. In the career I had, you are constantly, as you advance through stages, you're given psychological batteries. You're looked at and tested psychologically in many ways that you know about. Then there's ways that they're doing it that you don't know. You're not aware that they're doing it. And, I got every position I applied for and advanced everywhere I was supposed to advance, and I was put in charge of and given responsibility for some pretty sensitive things. And I'll tell you, if there's some problem there on the psychological level, you're not going to get the posts I got. You're not going to get the clearance I have. You're just not going to go the places I went if you've got those problems. And as I've said before, I started having extraordinary experiences, in my teen years. I mean, this was going on before I ever started to work for the FBI. Now, was I doing radio shows and writing articles about it? No, but the point is, if this were some psychological predisposition, what I'd call a psychological problem or issue, my point is, whether I was talking about it publicly, it would have come up on these measurements.
Okay, I understand that. We'll have to get to that in part 2. We have Walter Bosley. Our co-host is Greg Bishop. We'll have more on the other side of the Paracast.
We want to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our forums where you can talk to fellow listeners. Just go to theparacast.com and click on the forum links. That's the forum links at theparacast.com.
Welcome back to the Paracast.
Greg Bishop is the co-host, Walter Bosley returning. We're exploring in more detail some of the things that he touched on in his first, actually, this is his third appearance on the Paracast. The first, of course, was when we were talking about theories with regard to UFOs from under the surface of the Earth or cryptoterrestrials. Then the second episode with Greg, we talk more about his personal experiences. And now we're exploring more details about what happened to his father. Now, you wrote the article for Fate magazine about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, since then, have you gotten any letters or information from the people who read that article saying, I got more information, I got this, I got that, whatever?
No, I've had more, I've had a few emails from people that have said that their experience, the experience they would relate is not really anything that that would corroborate or add anything to that experience. It was more, similar in a very vague or distant way. But to answer your question, as straight as possible, no, not really.
Okay, so it may have at least put the information out there, but it didn't bring you anything you could investigate or follow up.
No, other than the stuff that had been out there, throughout history about, other races, lost civilizations, and how they're very often tied to the underground. throughout the lore, through history. I think the first time I was on your show, I said throughout history there have been these stories and legends, and one of the naysayers took task to that. History, I don't see that recorded in the history of Pliny the Elder, blah, blah, blah. It's like I said the lore throughout history. You got to listen to what people say. Sometimes a little closer, but
once or twice a day.
Yeah, but throughout history, there has been lore. There have been accounts of very, similar things. But I haven't heard anything. I guess Fate Magazine hadn't either, because they put the article in their hardcover Best of Roswell, presenting all their different theories and stuff. They felt it was unique enough that they put it in there. And, I haven't heard anything quite exactly like it, other than, there are stories about these battles between Blue Team Delta and evil aliens and stuff, but that's more in the ET hypothesis basket, but it is technically, subterranean. So I guess some people might associate it.
Well, certainly if another race didn't want you to know they were here, they might pretend or give people the impression they were from out there. This way you don't look in the right place. They misdirect.
Sure. Well, look, if you're underground and you don't want to be seen, where are you going to tell people to look? Look up in the sky, right? I mean, it's sleight of hand.
It's a bird, it's a plane, it's E.T.
Yeah, if you're under their feet and you don't want them to be looking too close at you under their feet, then you're going to tell them look above their head, look in the sky. And if that's what they've been doing, boy, it's working. Because and here's what I find interesting, not just on this, but on the other issue that got people spun up. I've talked about a lot of things. The one issue was the one that seemed to get the people spun up the most. But on the UFO issue, it really, there's something about the subterranean issue or the hidden civilization, the crypto-terrestrial, that some people, it just really irks them. It really burns them. And I find that interesting. Because a lot of times, not in every case, but a lot of times you talk to these people and you find the other things that they're willing to buy. And I just want to kind of laugh and go, wait a minute, you buy this, and this, but you point at this other thing and you say, oh, that's a bunch of hogwash. It really gets to be silly when you talk about an audience of any venue that talks about the paranormal or any extraordinary phenomena to any degree, and you got people that are real agitated and vehemently opposed to something, but hey, they buy into Chupacabra, Bigfoot, or whatever. And not to put those down, but the point is, folks, we're all kind of swimming in the same pool here. And it's kind of like one nut in the asylum calling another nut crazy.
It's like Jack Nicholson talking to the other crazy people in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, maybe. Hey, let me ask you a few other questions about this. All right, so does Walter Bosley believe there is an ET out there?
Yes.
And
yes,
maybe he's coming here?
Of course. I think ET's been coming here all along and will continue to do so.
You say, well, Gene said ET, and then Walter said yes. Do you mean extraterrestrial or just not human?
Extraterrestrial. Absolutely, I think that. I believe that there's, other extraterrestrial races living on literally other planets, and they cross space to come here, to go other places. Yes, I do believe that.
What is there about the evidence for ET that encourages that belief?
Well,
because I'm trying to separate this from the theory of the crypto-terrestrials, okay?
Okay. There's been enough sightings that, that can't be explained through conventional means that, when you get into the details of the sighting, it came from outer space. There have been, enough things, in my opinion, that appear to have been found on the moon, on Mars and such that indicate, an intelligence, has been there. If not, isn't still there.
Okay, let's pursue that for a second. Okay, things found. Are you talking about the stuff that someone like Richard Hoagland brings out about possible artifacts on the moon and on Mars?
Hoagland's not the only one, but yeah, when you're talking, there's been several people that point to, possible artifacts that, it's not entirely explainable by, photographic phenomena.
We like the face on Mars.
Well, not just the face on Mars, the things on the moon and the various things. I don't want to, like that, but I don't
Okay, well, that's, this is a fascinating subject we haven't touched upon. And since the door is open, let's step through it and let's look at the anomalies on the moon. And we've had not much coverage of anomalies on the moon here. I mean, we addressed them in some ways when we talked to the late Mac Tonys. And then in an episode we had with Don Ecker and Bob Kvyat, we touched upon some of the moon anomalies. What do you see that's anomalous in anything that we've presented publicly in terms of photographs or evidence from the moon?
You mean, when you say we, you mean official NASA or just anybody?
Anybody, but I assume official NASA starts with it since, they sent the probes. We were there. I hope we were there.
Yeah, well, I think we were there. We went to the moon. I think, if anything, we're just simply, again, this is my opinion based on, experience or what studies I've done, and based on studying the work of others. I am not an expert on this, by the way. I'm just, very much, a student of these things. I'm not the expert on this stuff, but what I've seen and what I've studied and what has been presented, and what I know how the government works, and what I know how, how classified projects work, I do not believe that we were told everything that was found on the moon. And that doesn't bother me. That doesn't keep me up late at night. It doesn't piss me off. I mean, come on. They went up there and, NASA, most people don't realize it, but NASA has very much a national defense aspect to its mission. And, we sent our guys up there, and I wouldn't expect that if they found certain things until they knew how they wanted to handle it, or if it served a strategic purpose, I would fully expect that they would keep some things from us. I think it would have been very easy for them to keep things from us. I am not one of those who believes the government is so incompetent they can't keep a secret. To me, that's ridiculous. They can keep a secret if they want to. And I've argued that point in a lot of places. But that's what I think about our Apollo program. I think it's very easy I do think we have, a secret space program, secret in that, I think the Air Force very easily can be sending bodies up into space any old time they want to without the public knowing it. And, it would surprise me if we hadn't been.
But publicly, the space program has basically been going to hell. And a breadbasket. We've cut back on the budget. There's a lot of controversy over the way we're treating future space programs. But that would be the public space program. So you feel there's a private space program maybe with more advanced technology?
Or it doesn't necessarily have to be more, way far more advanced, just, going on in ways that it's camouflage. For instance, the Air Force pops a rocket up off of Vandenberg, and of course, a lot of people see the rocket go up. We know when there's a launch. Well, you don't know exactly what the payload is inside there, and I know there's some people that, will point out that, well, there's this and that can pick up the telemetry of when there's a life support system on board something, and I think, wait a minute, we have pretty sophisticated systems, for warfare that jam certain radars and jam certain signals and confuse signals. Who's to say they don't have something that, if you've got a payload, a life support payload inside one of those rockets that they're not telling the public there's people in there, and by the way, they're not obligated to. Who's to say we don't have the technology that, that can camouflage the fact that there's a life support system in there.
Or that there was even a launch. People that are interested should go on the, what's it called? Well, there's a list for Vandenberg Air Force Base, and they'll actually email you, a guy that's sort of associated with Vandenberg, will email you a list of when they're having launches and what the payload is, sort of, unless it's very secretive. And then he'll just say NSA payload. They have one section called Weird Stuff, And there's actually some very strange reports on there. Speaking of secret space programs, a guy wrote into the list and he said he was flying on a commercial airline, either to or from Hawaii, coming in towards the Southern California coast. And he said they saw a plane, or at least a contrail, going across the sky above them. And he said all of a sudden the contrail stopped or disappeared, and another trail went straight up from it, like right up into space. So you would assume they're launching something from way up in the atmosphere where you can't really, most people wouldn't really be looking or be able to see it.
My experience in the Air Force left me with the position that it's, for me, this works for me. You know what? I'm not telling you that it should work for you. I'm not implying that. I'm not insinuating that. I'm telling you my position. My position after my experience in the Air Force is I would feel silly thinking, well, there's no secret space program. Well, we couldn't be sending people up there. For me, that would be a silly assumption on my part.
Okay, but that's basically a theory on your part. It's not that you have some kind of guilty knowledge here.
Theory based on having spent 6 years on active duty in the Air Force OSI, which is very much involved in protection of Air Force material and programs. You know, I was exposed to things, let's say, and leave it at that.
Okay, so you can't tell us what you were exposed to because...
Of course not.
Because somebody would knock on your door and you'd face some serious problems.
Well,
okay.
and before they knock on my door, I wouldn't feel good about doing it. I mean, you know...
but you feel you can go so far as to say there is a secret space program. Maybe we're sending astronauts out there. Maybe we have found some further bits of evidence about what's happening on the moon.
All the things you said, maybe on, yes, maybe also. But the first thing you said was, I said I'd feel silly to think that there's not a secret space program.
Is there a secret UFO agenda? Do strange creatures from the darkest corners of the mind roam the Earth? Is there evidence for mind control, time travel, or devious government conspiracies? Find out the inside scoop on the latest conspiracies, paranormal activity, and Fortean phenomena when you subscribe to Tim Beckley's Conspiracy Journal. It's jam-packed with stories, special book and DVD promotions, and the best news, it's absolutely free, sent right to your mailbox. Plus, a bonus free email newsletter sent out every Friday. Simply send an email with your name and address to MrUFO@webtv.net. That's MrUFO@webtv.net. Find out what they don't want you to know.
This is the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
Greg Bishop is the co-host. Walter Bosley is the guest. And now we're talking about, we've started with Roswell and his remembrances from his father and some of his experiences, getting into his opinions about the moon, the Mars, the anomalies. Okay, but since we don't know the details of the secret space program, we assume, for the sake of argument, we'll just assume there is one, of course, going on. All right. So what evidence is there that we can see that shows some anomalous stuff on the moon?
Yes, I said, I'm not the expert on this. Look to Hoagland's material. Look to, there's, you do a basic search, in your library, on the web, in your bookstore. There's any number of books that, you can find where other researchers...
Okay, but you basically, Hoagland is pretty controversial and a lot of people don't believe him.
Oh, it's all controversial. Sure. I mean, let's be honest here. Let's be honest with it. We all do these shows. We like to come on here and we say, well, that guy's controversial, but at the same time, we'll embrace this guy over here who's, for whatever reason, usually because he's just more popular.
Okay, so basically, my favorite nut is not your favorite nut.
Exactly.
But you feel there's something credible based on your life experience, whatever. You feel something is credible about Hoagland suggesting there are moon anomalies indicating some intelligence has been there, is there, and the same is true for Mars.
Yeah, without agreeing with every little point he makes, I think basically he's onto something, and he wasn't the first. There have been others.
Hey, Gene, I think you were implying that Walter was saying that because of his experience in the military that he thought there were moon anomalies. I don't think... Is that what you're saying, Walter?
I think unless you're saying, well, because of your experience in the military, it's possible for them to do things that aren't on the radar, as they say.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's exactly... Yeah, I am saying that.
All right.
But
I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, assuming that you have guilty knowledge that you're hinting at here.
You know what? There are things I was told by people with higher clearances than mine and in more years that I'm not at liberty to share, that goes into the mix, on why I think what I think. But nothing I can, there's no file I can pull out or point to that, that's going to be the smoking gun.
Okay, so you can see it as a possibility. Nothing that you've observed, if you look at the photos, shows you, hey, this is pretty weird. Maybe this is something, if I blow it up 400 times, it shows some kind of artifact.
Now, you just said nothing. The photos I've seen that are available out there for everybody to see, yeah, there are some pretty questionable, what the heck is this? It doesn't look natural. It looks artificial. Yeah, that's my point. And that stuff's out there for anybody to go see.
Okay.
Don Ecker had as you said, Gene, he has a very heavy interest in moon anomalies, and I think he's had one or two researchers on if people want to listen to any of his shows with their compelling evidence in a more specific format. A long time ago, I published a story called The Square Craters on the Moon because I just happened to get in contact with somebody who was a JPL scientist who looked at some pictures from the surveyor craft that were mapping the moon for the Apollo missions, and they saw these craters that were square. I mean, they were, the craters were right angles to each other, and there are 3 or 4 of them near the North Pole. Don seems to discount them for reasons that I cannot fathom, but to me, they're still very, very strange looking. I don't know what they prove, but they certainly look not natural.
Okay, what about Mars, Walter? What's there about Mars other than Hoagland's face on Mars? What else do you see?
Well, the holes are very interesting in that years before I had, heard interesting source that there was, subterranean civilization on Mars. And then years later, they reveal these holes to us. That's an interesting thing to look into. The jury's still out on that as it is on other things. But there have been things that, again, other researchers have presented that you got to wonder, well, what is this? This doesn't look natural. Or why is this condition on Mars not doesn't match what the impression we're normally given is, that it's this dry, arid, nothing but red dust place. And, but that stuff's out there. Again, I'm not the expert on this stuff. I just, like other people, I look at it and personally, it gives me a particular impression that, there's something to this.
Then we also wonder why are we cutting back the space program, at least publicly? I think it'd be great politically to say, okay, we're going to go back to the moon, we're going to go to Mars, not in 40 years or 30 years where we're all too old to care. But why are they cutting back?
Well, maybe consider this possibility, that maybe the leaders don't have the burning issue to do this grand, glorious mission because, gosh, they know we're doing it anyway. And there are more pressing matters here at home that, in many people's opinion, that, they figure, well, I better deal with this.
Even if E.T. is there, E.T. has been there, E.T. is here, and we have the evidence. This can turn civilization upside down, though.
Well, maybe, and maybe there's a good reason that they're not telling us about E.T. Maybe, maybe it's part of an agreement. You meet this other civilization and their thing is, hey, here's the deal. We'll interact with you in this way and to this degree, but no, you don't tell your people about us. And that's the deal. And you either agree to it or we're gone. And whatever it is they offer, that's possible. I'm not a believer that disclosure is right around the corner. You want to ask something that I'm not buying into? That's one of them. I don't see disclosure happening right around the corner. There may be a very good reason why those beans aren't spilled if there's beans to spill.
Well, that assumes, of course, that they know anything more than we do.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And maybe they don't. I would say they're in the position to know more than we do when you consider who controls the machinery that's up there in the sky and who, works, the most advanced stuff. I would say they are more in a position than we are, but, they might not.
And the other question, of course, we raise here is, all right, so if there's a space program, it's being financed with black projects, there's hidden money, it's the $3 trillion that Donald Rumsfeld couldn't find back in 10 years ago? Mm-hmm. Is that it?
Why not? That seems to be the good explanation there. Black programs, something you don't know about, trillions of dollars, there you go. To me, that's a big indicator right there.
Well, we're certainly broke, so it's got to be going somewhere. And they're not spending $10,000 for a toilet seat. Isn't that the comment that Judd Hirsch made in the movie Independence Day?
Yes, something like that, yeah.
Okay, so let's go into disclosure a little bit here. We've got all these, I think, very serious people, very sincere people, and then the disclosure wackos out there. Mm-hmm. And the disclosure wackos figure, we're in touch with E.T., Obama's going to announce it tomorrow, but wait, he didn't, and this is why he didn't. A new conspiracy. But does Obama or any other president know anything?
Yes, I am not one of those who, Hollywood loves the scenario where the guys in the ultra secret military organization or intel organization know the biggest, darkest secrets. And of course, the president isn't told because he's not there as long as these bureaucrats. And in my experience being a federal employee, my humble experience, that one I don't buy. I think that's one of the many reasons why you see presidents not doing certain things, and in some cases they alluded to, if not promised, in their campaigns. And usually, specifically, that UFO promise that some of them kind of make, and then they shut up and don't talk about it after that. Let's do a little math here. You got a guy who's running for this high office, and he says, I'm going to tell everybody the truth about Roswell, about UFOs, and we're going to get to the bottom of this and make it public. And then they never seem to do it. You never hear him talk about it again. Gosh, I mean, think about that, folks. What does that tell you? Does that not indicate, possibly, I'm just saying possibly, maybe, would that not maybe imply that when they get into office and they're briefed on everything, that one of the things they're briefed on is whatever the truth is about that issue and why it can't be talked about?
The only president I remember that being done with that actually said that was Jimmy Carter.
Yeah,
before
Jimmy Carter
he was elected.
Yeah.
And then I heard one of these stories, specifically, I think, from Bill Moore, that there was a meeting, some sort of meeting, and he saw the notes from it. Basically, they told Carter what was going on, and he agreed it was more important than keeping to that vague campaign promise. Because if somebody brings that up on the campaign trail now, they're laughed out of the room. I don't think it's anything to include in your platform when you're trying to get elected.
Except for a certain Ohio congressman who his godmother or something is Shirley MacLaine, so...
Oh, yeah. If you want to find out more about it, you should either go to Grant Cameron's presidential UFO site or have Grant on. Have you had him on yet on Paracast?
No, we'll have you as the co-host. Hey neighbors, have you been thinking about starting a website? Well, I'm going to tell you about a great offer from HostGator. HostGator is a world-famous leader in web hosting, and they make it easy for you to get your own .com domain name. You create your very own website with their free site builder tools and great selection of templates. Use the coupon code Paracast. Once again, use the coupon code Paracast and sign up at this special address, theparacast.com/gator. That's Gator, theparacast.com/gator.
You're in the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
By the way, talking with co-host Greg Bishop, our guest is Walter Bosley, and we're certainly going way out there trying to figure out a lot of the things that are going on, also discussing disclosure. Of course, there was that crazy statement that Ronald Reagan once made.
Right.
Okay.
I think he made it more than once, actually. He alluded to that like 3 different times while he was in office about the You are talking about if there's another civilization, we'd all have to band together kind of thing.
He was talking to Klaatu on the phone at the time.
Yeah.
Similar to MacArthur's farewell address, that gets brought up occasionally, that he said, to the guys at West Point, that the adversary in the new future, the war would be fighting, would be a war with people from space. And, it's kind of in that vein. And it makes you go, wow, gosh, what are we to think of this? But whether alluded to or not, it's certainly the public is vocal about, hey, Mr. New President, why don't you tell us what's going on? And of course, in recent years, Obama's the disclosure president, the guy who was saying that constantly, and it hasn't happened yet, and it's not going to happen. I don't think in that way. I think whatever their personal interest is, and I think it would be natural that they might have a passing interest at the very least. I think these presidents are told what it is and why, it's kept secret. And like Carter said, they agree with it. So this is my thought on it at this point in my life.
Okay, so is the effort towards disclosure always doomed to be a failure?
On the one, that's hard to answer. On the one hand, you'd say, well, no, from an awareness level to general public awareness, no, they should keep up the requests, because that does let the leaders get test the waters, measure the temperature of the public's acceptance. Okay, the level of the ability to handle this and accept it, if it is true, by the way. But as far as you're going to get a bunch of people to do a petition and you're going to compel, any president to say, I really don't see that happening. I think that I'm one of those who thinks disclosure will come when those being hidden disclose themselves. When the ETs, so to speak, say, well, okay, we don't want to be secret anymore. We don't need to be secret, and there you go. That's what I think.
That's assuming it's in a way that we can understand as contact with something else. I don't know if we're at the point yet where we can meet them on that on the same playing field. What do you think, Walter?
What do you mean by that, though?
That whatever they are, or whatever it is, if they're and I'm pretty sure there is some other. A case could be made that they have revealed themselves to us, and we can't really, and we're not really speaking the same language, so we just don't acknowledge it.
Oh, okay. Kind of like a dolphin trying to talk to a human kind of thing. It's like we hear a bunch of squeaks, they hear a bunch of grunts, And
in a crude way, yes. What do you think of that idea?
I think, of course, if you look at the possibilities of all the different species, you probably. But I do want to say that I'm not one of those that makes that other assumption that way too many people. I'd like to say that again here. Way too many people make the assumption that just because a civilization can cross the stars, that they must be so much more advanced than we are to a degree that we just can't understand their technology. And B, the other fallacy, they must be peaceful, because only a peace-loving civilization could achieve such advanced technology when most technology, a great deal of it, advances because of war. I almost laugh at that one, the assumption that, they're peace-loving, and the assumption that they're all so much more advanced than we are. I think there's civilizations out there that are just maybe a little bit ahead of us.
Well, you can also look at another possibility, too. And maybe I'm taking this idea from the Stargate TV series, okay, where there is evidence of an ancient civilization not here anymore, and we use their spaceships, but we know nothing more except how to run them.
Right.
Or make a few repairs, or maybe it's self-repairing.
Which has the Stargate, how you just described Stargate, has an actual historical precedent in that this is what the Germans were messing around with during the World War II era, that they had gleaned from ancient Hindu texts, and like the Mahabharata, talking about the Vimanas. It's there, folks. I mean, they exactly what you described, an ancient civilization that is no longer with us, that had advanced technology, and somebody in our own time is just saying, hey, look at this, let's try this. And I'm saying very basically that's what they were doing. There were people before the Nazi regime in the late 1800s and the early 1900s prior to World War II who were doing this stuff. Victor Schauberger was the German who was doing it, but you had Tesla that was messing around with some of this stuff. It started in the mid-1800s with Keeley. Again, all controversial. Not being controversial was some type of measure of criteria to be discussed, then guess what? We'd be listening to dead air. So the point is there is a historical precedent, whether you accept it or not, whether you agree with it or believe it or not, it is there. The Stargate theory that you just brought out, that, you know, some very old stuff is just being used, and we know how to use it. You know, we know how to fly it. Maybe we're still figuring out the finer points of the technology, but we've got it working. I mean, look at it this way. In the early jet age, we were fooling around enough with jet engines where we started flying these things around. But has jet technology, you know, not, you know, advanced in some increments over the years we're using it? Duh. Yes, it has. I mean, you know, a modern jet engine is more advanced than a jet engine, more developed than a jet engine from, you know, 1950. So why not? You know, you take the ancient description of this technology and you mess with it enough to get it working, to get it operable, and then over the years, of course, you understand it better. You make it better. You're able to do it better. So, you know, anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, so it's one possible answer. Certainly, also, we could have had civilizations here that became spacefaring, and then for whatever reason, they disappeared, and they're coming back to visit us now because they came from here.
Yeah. Is there not an ancient, I think it's one of the books of the Apocrypha, but Enoch of the Bible, I believe, is the one who built the city that, you know, lifted up into the stars. Some people, not me, have pointed to that story when they're trying to say maybe at one time there was an advanced civilization on the moon. Maybe this legend of Enoch building his city that lifted from the planet into the sky, maybe that was some type of technology, a ship or something that went to the moon. You know, I'm just saying that's a possibility that others have pointed out. And this is just one example of these things when we say the lore throughout history talks about things like this. So you look close enough, and it is there, these things. I found most of the people that just write it off, they want to write it off. It doesn't fit their, you know, it's not their pet theory, so they really don't want to hear anything else. And not everybody's that way. There's several people.
It also may be the ultimate Rorschach blot, where people are going to put the meaning on that they want to, and especially with UFOs, find the information and the evidence that supports whatever their preconception is.
Right.
The other possibility, when Walter was saying about warlike and not warlike and afraid ahead of us or behind us, you know, my favorite quote, which I repeat endlessly, is that maybe they're off to the side.
Yes.
And we don't, you know, their method of dealing with us and with each other is completely different than what we do with power. And I've got more power than you are. I've got this or that, and you don't have this, and therefore I come out on top. They may completely opt out of that in ways that we haven't been able to describe or think about yet. Possibly.
Greg makes a very good point. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about this on the show. I'm sorry, I should be interviewing Walter, but it's turning into it's Walter and I talking about stuff and throwing ideas around.
Yeah, but consider this, too, that, you know, you two have a history of discussing these things, and a lot of the listeners to this show maybe aren't aware of that history, so you kind of have to ask the questions again and maybe go from there.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was bringing it up. I mean, yes, I should be asking Walter questions, but I thought, well, Gene hasn't talked to him nearly as much, so maybe I can clarify or bring something up or say, you know, Walter and I have considered this before, and we've gone down this tributary a little bit, and we've got some good response from it. And if nothing else, you know, it's there out on the table waiting for more evidence, or at least it was just fun talking about it. I mean, that's basically what a lot of this paranormal and UFO stuff is. You're playing with ideas because there's no real way you're going to bring something in a lab or make a reproducible phenomenon or whatever. It's just it's more of a philosophical discussion, I think.
You know, you bring up a good direction that I think we should go in the remaining time, and that is that I'd like to say, speaking for myself, my position on how much I want anyone to believe what I'm saying or my experience has changed. The more I have experienced certain things now, the less important to me it has become that people necessarily believe me. I can't, because some of the most extraordinary experiences, they evade the ability to capture the evidence that's going to convince the people that demand the evidence. And I've come to the conclusion that that's not what matters. I realize that, wow, some of this might indeed be intended for me personally. Not that it's any less real, but, I won't argue that. I already know what I think about that. But it's interesting. I realize, well, if my experience is showing me something that's intended for me, it doesn't matter what other people think of it or whether they believe it or not. I'm left with, well, you're missing out. You're just missing out. Okay, but that's your choice. Oh well. And I'm really much more to an oh well point than I ever was. It's really interesting.
Really, why?
Because what I'm getting out of it is far more valuable than convincing a complete stranger that it's real. The insight, the things I'm led to. And I will say this, too. The things I'm led to that I'm able to produce evidence for. That's the most fascinating aspect of this. It gives me insight. It leads me to things that are provable. And
can you give an example?
Some of the things that I've started writing about, I've come to them initially through some of these insights, and they are things that are down-to-earth facts that I have been able to, that as you will see, I'm able to corroborate with, documented, type of evidence. Now, isn't that interesting?
Well, it sounds like how a lot of people come up with ideas or inventions. It's specifically Tesla used to say that they would just appear to him, and and he didn't know why, and then suddenly he'd put them down on paper and build them, and they'd work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or the what is it? The chemical formula for benzene or something like that was seen in a dream, because a guy had who was it? I can't remember the name of the scientist. Had a dream about snakes swallowing their tails, and got him the idea of the molecule being connected as in a circular pattern.
But yeah, I exactly what you're saying. Yeah, but I want to add on there that a couple of things that some people might say that, well, that might be some type of archetypal, symbolism that your subconscious is doing to lead you to the conscious actual thing.
Sure, great.
I'm talking about, something, I'm given an insight through an extraordinary experience, and then it points to something that is very down to earth, and then that I never would have known before, that I was overlooking or I just wasn't aware of. It's like opening a book in the middle and, jumping in kind of thing, and then going back and forward, and you find what supports what you just read on that page, But the other thing is this that I want to throw out there, and this is what I've learned, and that is I've mentioned in the past maybe a couple of times, and that's this old phrase, the admonition of Isis, and that is when, and I'm speaking symbolically here, when she, the truth or whatever, reveals her face to you, her admonition is, tell no one. And I'm beginning, for me, I think I'm understanding why tell no one. The obvious is because everyone will say you're a nut. The other thing is, you've come to something through your own work, your own toil, your own investigation. You're under no obligation to just lay it all out for the next guy who doesn't want to do his own work. And I whereas before I was, I'll have all these experiences and I'll tell you all about them and it'll illuminate you. And I've come to the point now where it's like, oh, you really want to know? You really want the proof? You really want evidence so that you can believe it and accept it? Well, you get out there and you do what I've done. Or, go on your own path to the extent, the things I or other people that have done. And see what you get. Because, for me, what's revealed to me for me is intended for me, and what you'll get out of it is intended for you. And I'm not saying this in a allegorical, well, it's not real, it's all mental. No, I don't believe that. I believe it's real.
But we all have to go through the separate journey, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, before we go to the final journey,
for 58 years, Fate has provided true reports of the strange and unknown. Fate brings you the latest in all aspects of the paranormal, like angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, and much, much more. To receive your complimentary Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730 or www.fatemag.com. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
This is the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
Walter Bosley, Greg Bishop. Greg's our co-host. Walter's back, and we're taking a journey. Other than the things that you can only understand through your own personal journey, are there bits and pieces of evidence you can convey to us about any of these things? Certainly we talked about the lunar mysteries. We can look into Hoagland, believe him or not. And, a lot of people disbelieve and some people do believe. But are there other things where you can say, here's the tidbit of evidence, look it over and you'll see some indication of what's going on? Certainly with UFO cases, we have thousands of cases to go through. So is that part of what you're getting at?
Could you put that more succinctly? Like what? If you're saying what I'm saying,
here's the point. There obviously are things that we can all look at and reach decisions about. Right. We could look at theories about anomalies on the moon and Mars.
Yeah, and there's several out there, not just Hoagland.
I understand that, and those are things we want to explore in further detail on future episodes. Okay. We could look into the stories of Roswell. Plenty of books out there, plenty of versions, from Nazis to mogul balloons to E.T. to crypto-terrestrials. Your father's remembrances, the civilization beneath the earth, the Diros, the Tiros, a lot of things we can put out there. Now, obviously, there are other things where you take all this, you have a lifetime of experiences, and then you come to an understanding that maybe you can experience, but you can't tell us. But you can't tell. Someone once said that.
Yeah. Well, because there's certain things that, my position is such that there's certain things that you're not going to be believed. I mean, look at how, one or two things I've said, has been reacted to. There's just people are just going to say, oh, well, they get all worked up. They're just so. First of all, there's a lot of people out there that just flat out aren't going to believe it. And then, there are those who would be open to it, but they still, need evidence. Well, you just can't capture evidence. And you can't explain it sufficiently enough. And I believe that the phenomena, what's driving these phenomena, these experiences, are doing that on purpose because it wants interaction. It wants personal interaction. Basically, in some ways, I have more respect for an atheist than an agnostic. And I'm speaking in very general, basic terms here to make a point. And that is, at least the atheist isn't sitting on the damn fence. When I hear somebody say, well, I've been a lifelong agnostic. Oh, well, when are you going to make up your mind? When you're really going to commit to really trying to find that answer for yourself. And you can be that way in this stuff too.
So being an agnostic is a cop-out. If you're an agnostic, that's a cop-out because you're saying, I'm not going to bother figuring it out.
Yeah, if it goes on too long, it's what it amounts to. It's just a cop-out. And my point is that whatever's driving these phenomena, it wants interaction. It wants to show itself and manifest itself to you. So quit sitting there reading the books or, just listening to guys like us on podcasts or going in the forums and, pissing on everybody's parade. Get out there and, make a serious, honest attempt. There's the other problem. Some people claim that and they're not being honest. They're not making an honest attempt, because even if somebody comes back and they don't experience, what you experienced, or maybe they don't experience anything at that time, you can, your gut meter, your intuition will tell you if they've given it an honest try, as opposed to the person that just says, "Oh, I went out there and did this and nothing happened. Ha ha ha! You're an idiot." Well, my experience with the human race is that person very likely did not give it the honest try, because they were predisposed that nothing was going to happen. And I don't like to get into discussions with people like that, because that's just mental masturbation, and people that are just really into logic turns them on. And
so basically you're saying also that if you expect nothing's going to happen, it probably won't.
There you go. Why should it? Why should it?
Why it would turn their belief system upside down, wouldn't it, though?
But what I'm saying is, if you're the entity and the person is think about it. It must be really entertaining to let's say, for the point of my example, let's say you accept the fact that the entity is real, right? Well, who's to say it's not entertaining to watch some human being so damn smug in their ignorance? So it's like, I'm not going to show myself to you. Screw you. Because you're not going to appreciate it. You're not going to appreciate what I'm going to show you and give you. You're going to question it. You're going to try to explain it away in a way that, it just isn't the truth, but it makes you more comfortable.
Well, sometimes you have to explain it away, because sometimes it deserves to be explained away.
Well, okay, give me an example. You said sometimes. That's not every time, and that's...
No, of course not. I'm saying certain events are not real, they're misinterpretations, whatever. So you explain them away. Well, this is conventional. This is an anomaly, or this is a conventional thing. Well, it was really the planet Mars. I didn't look at it right, and that's what it is, or Venus.
In some cases, sure. You're right. But a lot of times, the people that very accurately explain something away that was a mistake, therefore, because they do that one time in that instance, therefore they apply that then to everything else. There are people out there that do that, and those are the people I'm talking about that are predisposed. They want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Hey, Walter, before you came on, Gene asked me what my position was on the UFO thing, and what I said was I'm exceedingly agnostic. I still haven't figured it out, and I don't know if I ever will, and I actually don't really care. So by what you said, I'm copping out.
Well, Greg, knowing you personally, I think you care more than you consciously feel right now.
I do care. I would care to figure out what was going on, but it's far more importantly, and I think you have the same feeling, the things I learn along the way in trying to figure out whether there's something real there or not, or what the explanation is far more valuable to me personally than what that explanation might be or the answer is.
Yeah, but this way, Greg, you're saying at least you're making the effort.
Yes.
You might be agnostic about the result, but you're making an effort to find out. It's not the same thing as saying, I don't know what it is, I don't care, I'm not going to explore any further.
There's always an exception, and there's always a qualifier to state.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the type of agnostic you are, the type of, agnostic certain other people we know might be, but they're trying, and I would venture to say, push comes to shove, I think you probably think that there's ETs out there on other worlds, Oh,
I'm almost certain of it. Now, whether they've come here or not is another deal.
Yeah. Okay, well.
And how they've done it, physically, some other way, paraphysically, mentally.
Yeah, that's a whole other fascinating discussion in itself.
So, there's so many facets to this subject that it's, trying to pin somebody down on something is terrible. I mean, you look at the UFO shows. I've been asked to be on like 5 of them. They've come out and interviewed me for about 3 of them. And in every single instance, and I know Gene knows about this and Walter does too, they want you to say something that absolutely is a true statement with no equivocation. Otherwise, you're not useful for their program, because people don't want to hear that.
Exactly. People have gotten to the point where they've got to have an answer. And the thing is, they're looking for other people for all these essential answers. When they go out there yourself, I've always said, regardless of the stories I've shared, regardless of my positions that I've shared and the comments I've made, have I not, Greg, since I've been doing, I started with your show, I've always told people, get out there and look yourself. Get out there and investigate yourself. Find your own answer.
Yeah, you are going to find your own answer.
You're going to find an answer. You are going to find something, and that's why I urge people to do it. Let me rephrase it. You've got a far, far greater possibility of finding a true, real answer by going out there yourself than you ever are going to get reading other people's books, listening to what other people have to say on podcasts and radio shows.
But also depends on your filter and the way that you investigate things, and if you even care or have enough time to do such a thing.
Sure. But like I say, if you hate soccer so much, stop going to soccer games. That's what I'm going to say to some people, It just, if you've reached the point to where you just everything sounds like hogwash and everything, at some point, well, maybe you want to, listen to podcasts about, Hemi cars or something for a while, because, you're just not going to get that smoke and gun that you're demanding on any of these shows. It's not likely. And I know some people don't want to hear that, because that's what they're looking for. But that's what goes back to what I said before, is we live in a society where, we want the expert. We want some other guy who's in a position to tell us how it is, so that we can, not do the work ourselves and just go on with our daily lives. And, let the other guy will do all the research and tell us how it is. And there we go. It's easier. Kind of like fast food. Somebody else prepares it, throws it in the bag. All we got to do is eat it, is ingest it. And that's what certainly the field of UFOs and extraordinary phenomenon, that's the experience of way too many people with it. And the other part of it is, it's scary to some folks, for various reasons. It's just, it's scary to them. So it's, they live vicariously through people. But I say, if you want the answers, get out there and look for them yourself. Go out there and test your own theories.
Well, that's one way to find out. I think part of the problem, as we've said in the past, is some people will go to a convention or watch a TV show or listen to a program. They hope that you're the expert on UFOs. You tell me what they are. You give me the Reader's Digest version. We don't want to sit here and read a 400-page book. We don't want to listen to 2 hours of radio where you basically say there are lots of theories and these are the possibilities and we don't know the final answer. They want you to have the final answer.
Well, then, if that's what they're looking for and they want to take final answers from somebody else's work, then in all honesty, some of them shouldn't be so critical of those who are out there doing and experiencing. You should say, well, I don't go out there and do the stuff myself. So, okay, this is what I think. But, it's I don't know. To me, it's people have to start being more honest with themselves, particularly where these things are concerned. Either you're going to accept what other people say or you're not. And if you're not, then get out there to find something to base your own opinion on. And, if you've gone out there and you've given it an honest try and you really come back and say, I experienced none of this, then, I got a lot